Ever pondered how war affects the most innocent of us all, our children? Ponder no more, as we delve into the unseen impacts of war on these young lives. The devastating consequences are not just physical, but also psychological and emotional, leaving scars that may never completely heal. Consider the conflict between Israel and Gaza. The origins of this tension date back decades, rooted in territorial disputes and political differences. Over time, these disagreements have escalated into violent confrontations, with airstrikes and rocket attacks becoming a terrifyingly normal part of life for the people caught in the crossfire. But let's focus on the children. In just 25 days of war, more than 3,600 Palestinian children lost their lives. They were not soldiers. They were not politicians. They were children with dreams, aspirations, and a life to live. Yet they found themselves in the midst of a war zone, their lives cut short by airstrikes, misfired rockets, and collapsing buildings. Nearly half of Gaza's 2.3 million inhabitants are under 18, and children account for 40% of the casualties. These figures are more than just statistics. They represent lives snuffed out prematurely, futures unfulfilled, and dreams shattered. The physical wounds may heal over time, but the psychological and emotional scars remain. Children in Gaza are growing up with the trauma of war, their childhood replaced by fear and uncertainty. It's not only the immediate danger that takes a toll. The constant state of stress, the looming threat of violence, and the loss of loved ones all contribute to long-term psychological distress. This distress is not limited to Palestinian children. Israeli children living in communities around Gaza have also been affected, their lives disrupted by the continuous exposure to bombardment. Ever pondered how war affects the most innocent of us all, our children? As we dive deeper, we uncover the horrifying reality of being a child in a war zone. This is not a story of statistics and political disputes. This is a story of children, their lost innocence, and the unseen impacts of war. The conflict began with a spark in Jerusalem, transforming into a raging fire that consumed Gaza. This was not a natural disaster, but a man-made catastrophe. The conflict, which started as a disagreement in Jerusalem, quickly escalated into a full-blown war between Israel and Hamas. The conflict's initial spark was a series of events in Jerusalem that fueled tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. These tensions finally ignited into a conflict, with both sides exchanging rockets and airstrikes. Israel's stated objective was to target Hamas militant sites and infrastructure. However, the reality on the ground was far different, with civilian areas bearing the brunt of the attacks. During this period, Hamas launched over 1,000 rockets towards Israel, which responded with its Iron Dome air defense system. While this system protected Israel from severe damage, Gaza, with its 2.3 million residents, had no such protection. The very people who had no part in the conflict were the ones who suffered the most. The international community watched with growing concern as the violence spiraled out of control. The United Nations reported extensive damage to housing units, with around 40 families displaced and the loss of many innocent lives. Unfortunately, the pleas for peace from the international community fell on deaf ears, as the conflict only intensified. Israel accused Hamas of using civilians as human shields, leading to a high civilian casualty rate. On the other hand, Hamas blamed Israel for the indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas. Regardless of who was to blame, the fact remains that the most affected were the innocent civilians, particularly children. This war, which lasted for an agonizing 25 days, was a nightmare for the people of Gaza. The grim reality of war became a daily ordeal for the residents, with every dawn bringing the fear of airstrikes and every dusk leaving behind a trail of destruction. Despite the ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Islamic Jihad, the aftermath of the conflict was a bitter pill to swallow for the people of Gaza. The scars of war were not just physical but also psychological, with the trauma leaving a lasting impact on the survivors. As the conflict escalated, the most vulnerable were caught in the crossfire. This was not just a war between two parties, it was a tragedy for humanity. A conflict that cost the lives of thousands of innocent children and left an indelible mark on the survivors. In just 25 days of war, over 3,600 Palestinian children lost their lives. The war between Israel and Hamas has exacted an unbearable toll on the youngest and most vulnerable of Gaza's population. These precious lives were extinguished in the blink of an eye, hit by airstrikes, crushed by buildings, burned by blasts, or smashed by misfired rockets. Among these children were newborns, toddlers, avid readers, and aspiring journalists. Some believed they would be safe in a church or their own homes, only to have their lives tragically cut short. Nearly half of the crowded strip's 2.3 million inhabitants are under 18, and children account for 40% of those killed so far in the war. Imagine the horror, the grief, the utter devastation of parents like Ahmed Modaweh, a carpenter from Gaza City. His 8-year-old daughter was one of the lives lost during 5 days of intense fighting in May. He said, "It's a curse to be a parent in Gaza." His words echo the heartbreaking sentiment of countless parents who have lost their children in this conflict. Even those children who survive bear deep physical and psychological scars. They are the victims of a trauma that is almost impossible to comprehend. Children like 4-year-old Kenzie, who survived an airstrike that took her right arm, crushed her left leg and fractured her skull. These children carry the weight of this conflict in their bodies and their minds, their childhood stolen from them in the cruelest of ways. The impact of this war on children is not limited to physical injury and death. The mental health crisis for Palestinian children has intensified. According to Euromed Human Rights Monitor, 91% of children in Gaza suffer from conflict-related trauma. Their well-being is at alarmingly low levels, with 1 in 2 children in need of mental health and psychosocial support. These are not just numbers, but children with dreams, hopes, and futures that have been tragically cut short. Each one had a name, a family, a life that mattered. Each one deserves to be more than a statistic in a war they didn't choose. While the world watches, organizations like UNICEF and Save the Children are sounding the alarm. Their voices echo the harsh reality of the situation, striving to bring attention to the dire circumstances that the children of Gaza face daily. Their tireless efforts to raise awareness, provide aid, and address the mental health crisis among these innocent victims of conflict are commendable. These organizations, among others, are deeply engaged in providing immediate relief and long-term support. They distribute food, water, and medical supplies. They set up temporary learning spaces so education isn't disrupted more than necessary. They provide psychological support to children traumatized by the horrors of war, helping them cope and gradually heal from their experiences. In addition to these humanitarian efforts, the global community has also responded in various ways. Protests have been organized across the world, with citizens from different countries expressing their outrage and advocating for a peaceful resolution. Social media platforms are brimming with posts and discussions about the situation, raising awareness and urging for action. International bodies like the United Nations have also voiced their concern. They have called for ceasefires, conducted investigations into possible war crimes, and urged all parties involved to respect international humanitarian laws that protect civilians, especially children. However, despite these efforts, the situation remains grim. The cycle of violence continues, with each new conflict bringing more devastation. The world watches, often feeling helpless as the narrative unfolds. It's crucial to remember that while the immediate needs of these children are being addressed, the root cause of their suffering, the conflict itself, still needs resolution. Without peace, the cycle of trauma and loss will likely continue, impacting generations to come. Yet amidst the despair, there is a glimmer of hope. The dedication and commitment of these organizations, the global community, and individuals who refuse to stay silent keep the flame of hope alive. Their work, their advocacy, their determination to make a difference are the silver lining in this otherwise dark cloud. Their work is a beacon of hope in a situation that often seems hopeless. Despite the overwhelming odds, they continue to fight for a better future for the children of Gaza. And while the journey is long and fraught with challenges, it is this unwavering spirit of humanity that holds the potential to eventually bring about change. While we cannot erase the scars of war, we can work towards healing and preventing further harm. Indeed, the situation in Gaza is heartbreaking, but we can make a difference. There are numerous ways to extend a helping hand to the children affected by this conflict, and it all starts with awareness. It's said that knowledge is power, and it's true. By staying informed about the situation in Gaza, we can better understand the challenges these children face every day. Share the stories you hear, the articles you read, and the videos you watch. By spreading the word, we raise awareness, and with awareness comes empathy. And empathy is the first step towards action. Donating is another powerful tool we have at our disposal. There are countless organisations dedicated to supporting children in conflict zones, such as Save the Children, UNICEF, and the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. These groups rely on our generosity to fund their vital work, from providing immediate relief like food and medical care, to long-term support such as education and mental health services. But it's not just about money. Volunteering your time can be equally impactful. Many organisations need volunteers to assist in various ways, from helping with fundraising events to advocating for change on social media. Your skills and time are valuable resources that can make a real difference. Lastly, we can use our voices to advocate for peace. Write to your representatives, sign petitions, and join peaceful protests. Encourage them to take action and support peace-building efforts. We must remember that behind every statistic is a child with dreams, hopes, and the right to a safe and secure childhood. Remember, every action, no matter how small, contributes to a safer world for our children. So let's stand together with compassion and determination to ensure a brighter future for the children of Gaza, and indeed for all children of the world.